So not only can shockwave, I think, help that, but it can regenerate not only tissues, but now cardiac tissue, possibly nerve stimulation. John Warlick, the president of TRT, makes a joke. He says, we're able to stimulate to regrowth heart cells in pigs and stimulate nerve cells in mice, but neither of them has health care insurance. But regardless of that, they're not abandoning their research. I've talked to some others that are heavy into the diagnostic industry. I talked to a fellow the other day out of Idaho whose company is in Boston, Massachusetts. They're heavy into nanotechnology where they can get down to a million times more understanding of what's going on in the cell than we have previously been able to see. You see cells in three-dimensional ways, not just a picture, but a three-dimensional way, and measure what's going on inside the cells. For instance, he says, we know that in healthy cells, there are certain elements of the cells that line up like your finger, but in cancerous cells, the fingers are spread and they begin to break off in those cells. They're now able to determine that. In other words, to determine early on maybe what is a cancer cell or not. But the ability to take a stem cell that does not yet know what it's doing and stimulate that or replicate that and then go to the point of need of healing is fascinating technology. So I am one who not only believes in salvaging limbs or saving limbs, particularly in terms of amputation, but I'm one who believes that especially this cutting-edge technology has to be applied to those who are losing limbs, being blown up every day. That's our war casualties coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. So TRT and we're working with Walter Reed. We've got some money from the Congress to look at a combat wound initiative there at Walter Reed, dealing with the question of how can we apply the latest technology for our best and brightest young men and women who have unfortunately been blown up. They're full of shrapnel. Sometimes their brains are scrambled with traumatic brain injury. Their limbs are messed up, sometimes multiple amputation. What is coming out of this war is the term polytrauma. In the Vietnam War, we lost more legs, arms, and eyes to war injury than in World War I and Korea combined. That is magnified on the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan now because you're saving lives there that would have died even in the Vietnam War. And so they come back to this country, to ultimately to Walter Reed, Bethesda, San Antonio, Brooke Army Hospital, and then ultimately to the Veterans Administration. I spoke to a VA group yesterday. I said, you have a hallowed mission. What a tragedy to lose young men and women on the battlefield. But what a terrible tragedy when they come home, as we used to call it in Vietnam, LZ home. When you're home, you think that things are going to be okay. What a tragedy if we don't give them the best, the most cutting-edge technology, and the finest research that we can possibly muster. So that's where I am. I'm heavy into saving limbs, but I'm also into regenerating life, whether through stem cell research, whether through shockwave therapy, and finally, the emotional aspect, the question of quality of life of an amputee or somebody who has been traumatically injured is a very real one. Post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't just happen to war casualties. I was head of the VA, and in 1978, for the first time, the Veterans Administration put together the diagnosis of PTSD. Then in 1980, we put together the Vet Center program to deal with the emotional aftermath of war, not only for veterans, but for their families. Now we have a family military, and so the families need the counseling just as much as the veterans do. So we have a tremendous, tremendous obligation we must live up to as a nation. I'm so glad, Dr. Alley, that you're including the Veterans Administration, not only in this conference, but in your work. Some of the finest work in this area is done by the VA. I know that. But we've got a lot of work to do. So I just want to thank you all as somebody who is maybe not the recipient of your limb salvage operation, but on behalf of those whose lives will be positively affected, positively changed, and they might not even know it until much later in their life, positively influenced by your work, by your research, by your personal commitment, by your innovation, by your brain power, and by your ultimately personal dedication to getting this job done. We're on the cutting edge over the next 5 years of tremendous breakthroughs in healing. Healing the body, the mind, and the spirit through tremendous new technologies, new applications of what we already know, and breakthroughs that we don't even particularly anticipate. We've got tremendous new diagnostic techniques, and we're using all kinds of new technologies to try to do what we need to do to help people live out their life in the fullest way. I see you, and I think of your challenge, and I think of your commitment, and I really think of the words that President Kennedy wound up his inaugural address with in 1960. It's been a personal challenge of mine ever since those days. And he said, with a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history, the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to save the land we love, asking his guidance and his blessing, knowing that on this earth, God's work must surely be our own. God bless you, and thank you.